Hello, my name is Annabel Harsing, and today we'll be talking about doing a literature review. Okay, then, nearly there, step 8, although I actually forgot to include the number in this slide, the literature review in your thesis. I won't be going through all of the steps in actually writing the literature review, but I will be covering some basics. So in terms of the literature review of your thesis, what should it do? Well, first of all, it should synthesize and classify prior literature in the field. So you provide a context for your own project by showing the universe of existing research in the field, and you position your own project in that field. The emphasis, though, is on synthesis and classification. So you don't provide a long analysis of all the literature, you synthesize and classify. In doing so, you critically appraise previous literature in the field. So you say what has been done, what has not been done. This doesn't mean that you summarize every paragraph by paragraph, every study there is. No, you do it in an integrative fashion. As I said, synthesize and classify. You then apply the literature to your research question. You indicate very clearly what has been done in prior research and what it is what you do in your own study. So you identify what we call the research gap, transforming what is already known into something that is new and interesting that you are going to research in your own study. And if you want to know a little bit more about what examiners are looking for in your thesis, there's a handy reference here. So what your literature review should not be like, and sometimes it's easier to see what you should be doing if you know what you should not be doing. It shouldn't be like the literature reviews you did in your undergraduate or master thesis. I'm not saying all of us did this, but many undergraduate and master students, they just go through the books and journals until they find a paragraph that looks sort of relevant and then copy it and rephrase it slightly. And then if you find something in the literature that didn't really fit with what you were trying to do, you just ignore it. That's really just journalism. You pick the bits and pieces that support your argument and you ignore the rest. No, in a PhD thesis, in a doctoral thesis, you really need to have an overview of all the primary studies that analyzes in a systematic way what is known and what is not yet known. So again, it's systematic, it's not journalistic. So why is a good literature review really important? Not just for your thesis, but in particular when you're going to write up articles from your thesis and try to publish these in journals. If we look at the reasons for why articles that are submitted to a journal are rejected, we see that the literature review plays quite an important role. Because the second most important reason why an article gets rejected after methodological flaws is failing to indicate the significance of the problem, not answering the so what question. Why is this issue important? Well, if you've done your literature review properly, you are able to articulate that significance. And then more than half of the manuscripts that were rejected because of the literature review section of the paper, because it wasn't comprehensive enough, because it wasn't well written, because it was out of date. There might be lots of reasons for why the literature review section wasn't appropriate, but that is a key reason. And it's much more important than some other sections, such as the conclusion section or the discussion section, because these sections are sections that can be fixed in later stages of the revise and resubmit process, but the literature review process is really crucial to show that you know the area. So how is your literature review in your thesis evaluated? If we look at your literature review with the eyes of an examiner, what are the criteria that an examiner looks at? Well, first of all, coverage, and we've discussed this quite a lot already in this session. The extent to which you find and include the relevant literature and how you've decided what is relevant. But if you've gone through the 7 steps we identified earlier, it shouldn't be difficult to do this. Then, and again, we've talked about this before, synthesis. How well do you summarize, analyze, and synthesize selected literature rather than just mention it one article after another? You really need to provide a synthesis of the most important findings. Then the methodology. How well have you identified the main methodologies and research techniques in the field and analyzed their advantages and disadvantages before deciding what methodology you are going to use in your own study? So remember, going back to the beginning of this presentation, you use a literature review not just to define the problem, not just to find a theoretical framework, but also to make decisions about research design and research methods. Then significance. How well do you discuss the practical and scholarly significance of the research problem? It's not enough to say, I have studied all of this literature and there is a gap. Nobody has studied this particular topic before. That might well be true, but maybe nobody has studied it before because it's completely insignificant. I once read an editorial by an editor who was so fed up with people just talking about the research gap and this hasn't been studied before, that he wrote a whole article about the build-up of fluff in his belly button, because he reasoned that nobody had ever studied the build-up of fluff in his belly button. Sure, nobody had, but obviously nobody had because it was a completely insignificant and uninteresting problem. Well, it might have been interesting to the one individual, but certainly not to the academic community. So don't just try and identify a research gap, but also identify why this is important, why this is significant enough to add to the stock of knowledge. And given that we're working in the field of business and management, also indicate why it is important not just to academics, but also to the wider society. And then finally, there is rhetoric. Is the literature written in a coherent structure, in a clear structure? Some of that is personal and people will have personal preferences, but a lot of it you will learn clearly during your studies and you will refine your skills in doing this.